Hi guys. Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of The Usual Place. Now on Sunday night, Singapore's attention was all about, not the EPL kickoffs that were happening, but Prime Minister Lawrence Wong delivering the National Day rally speech. Now analysts and armchair critics of Singapore politics have given the NDR mixed reviews. Now some say it was a rallying call around the Singapore spirit, while others said it was a bit flat, that it wasn't the fireworks and big announcements kind of rally that we've sometimes seen. Now, the policies and topics have been dissected intensely over the past couple of days. So today, I want to unpack two big things. Firstly, what the speech tells us about PM Wong's style of governance and why he chose to make "We First" the theme to rah-rah the crowd. Now, to do the unpacking with me, I have Jeremy Tan, one of the independent candidates at this year's general election, who received the highest vote share for an independent candidate in more than 50 years. Welcome to the show. I saw you nodding at some of the things I was saying. We'll get into it in a bit. Well, let me introduce the other person on the couch is Dr. Rebecca Grace Tan, who is a political science lecturer at the National University of Singapore. Now you're back on The Usual Place. Since you last came on during the general election. Welcome back.
Yeah. Been a while, man. Feels like it.
It's a different issue this time, and we're talking about the National Day rally. And I wanted to ask both of you, what was one major takeaway that you got from the National Day rally? Because for me, I thought he was a bit light on policy, which some people might agree with me. And it's very different from his first National Day rally last year, right? So last year you heard about shared parental leave, and there were enhancements to housing for couples, singles, and aged. And then there was the Kallang Alive Master Plan, among many other things. So in comparison, Sunday was a bit low on details. Thoughts, Jeremy?
Yeah, firstly, shout out to the best checkout system in the world for sponsoring this podcast, because I wore Uniqlo for my entire election.
Yeah, I feel like we've just been waiting the whole show to go live to say it. So Uniqlo is talking to you, but yes.
I think primarily for this year's National Day rally, the online sentiment was that most of the goodies have been given out last year. They've gotten a mandate, so now what? And I felt that we give the PM and his cabinet, and we want to support him, but they must give us the bitter medicine. And I felt that this was an opportunity that was missed, and perhaps his style of saying that the ministries individually will speak about the plans, I think it's one that we will just have to wait for. Primarily, I also believe that PM should use each National Day rally and, even in the SG60 one, to inspire, and don't be afraid of disappointing people, right? Because most of the time, I think most Singaporeans have started to come around that times will be more challenging than now. And I personally, and along with people online, they also wanted to hear more of that. Basically, let us confront all of the things that we are facing. Yeah. So I think that was an opportunity that could have been better used. Yeah.
What's your definition of bitter medicine? What do you think he should have said?
I think this National Day rally had no tones of what youth unemployment is happening. There's no indication of business liquidations, F&B closures, even the nightlife rejuvenation. I think these are elements that create Singapore's unique culture and identity. We pride ourselves with a lot of our culture with the hawker culture, and I felt that there was a great opportunity during the rally to speak and cover all these issues and how they will, calm our fears and let us know that, hey, we are going to get all of these things back on track, back to life, right? Because Singapore, we really love our, food culture and everything, and I think those were the three different topics that was not covered at all. Yeah.
Okay, so I want to throw it to Rebecca. What was your biggest takeaway, and what do you wish he had spoken about you felt was missing, perhaps?
Yeah, I mean, he started off kind of talking about how this particular NDR was like a big shift because obviously it's SG60, right? I mean, the start of his speech promised almost kind of like we were going to see a big shift in the way, with a new government in charge, because obviously the last NDR, he hadn't had the mandate that, would give him the permission to kind of move forward with whatever his grand plan was, So we kind of started off the speech going, this is a new stage. We have a new set of, generation of people who, did not grow up under independence, weren't born during independence. But then a lot of it was, there was nothing kind of groundbreaking about it. I mean, we don't necessarily need a kind of a big 180 turn on everything, but we were left a lot of reiteration of existing policies that have been announced. Obviously, they've been announced recently, but nothing new. Addressing, I mean, as Jeremy highlighted, issues that have come to the fore. So he was addressing some particularly recent concerns, whether it's vaping or AI and so forth. But a lot of the solutions were largely the same of what we've seen in the past, right? Upskilling, reskilling, and so it didn't kind of ignite the imagination, I think, because he starts off with a big kind of note of this is a new generation. I mean, every NDR really kind of does expect, this sets the tone for the next year ahead, is one thing, but also it's supposed to, this particular NDR was supposed to be the SG60 NDR, right? So what makes this NDR the start of his term as kind of Prime Minister with this significant mandate, right? What changes should we see in his governance? We didn't see a lot of shifts in that.
Well, can I just? Is it because we're just too hyped up about national? I mean, it is the most important political speech of the year.
Yeah.
But there are some years where there aren't that many announcements. I mean, it's not every year where we hear of okay. To be fair to the people in the north, good. There was plans for them.
I mean, that's exciting.
That's exciting. But do we place too much importance on this one? And is it because of SG16 and we? Yeah,
I think it probably has more to do with the general elections. I mean, we've just had a big general elections where a lot of changes. I mean, not a lot of changes were announced. I think there were some changes that were announced, and the reality is that in the lead up to elections and during the elections itself, you will see a lot of announcements of new policies, right? And we have seen, for example, announcements in recent weeks about all these new BTOs and so forth, right? And so I think those were the kind of big policy promises, and maybe not that we've run out of steam, but there's only so many changes you can implement without, upsetting the entire system, right? And so maybe you're trying to find that balance, and maybe we've kind of reached the bottom of that basket for the year. Maybe next year will be hopefully a different start. So it might just be that because this is a GE year, we had GE earlier, and all the excitement, he's pointing back to look at the stuff we've already announced. And so I think the NDR didn't have a lot of new stuff insofar as, apart from, the upgrading up north because of the URA master plan that was just unveiled.
Yeah,
go ahead.
My personal take is that the disconnect is something that needs to be addressed. The groundswell sentiment on housing, BTO, youth unemployment, and perhaps even the EP and the Compass framework that people have been talking about. All these are issues that have, I would say, substantial amount of debate online, and knowing to really collect that feedback online and also collect the feedback from the ground of how the cost of living and the cost of housing and the cost of COE and also hawker centers. I feel like there was a very good opportunity for PM Lawrence Wong to say, look, we hear you very specifically on the criticisms of these things, and I think that was the first step that he should have embarked on, and then all the other stuff that he mentioned thereafter, be it saying like AI or like we first, or which we will get to, then all of that will make sense. But I think the first step is to say, look, these are the problems that I hear you very clearly. They are there, right? And I think that as Bada Hansen once said, you need to be either very somber or very inspiring for that, right? Yeah. So and she felt it was neither, and I think this part was something that was maybe that is why he's got the reaction he got from people online and all over Singapore. Yeah.
I guess he was trying to he spoke about many different groups But did you feel like he should have honed in on like the general sentiment of the top issues at the top? Because he addressed young people, seniors, so there was a little bit of something for everyone. But you feel that it was not enough.
Yeah, I think okay. So let me take the example of AI. The current government has its position and its narrative that AI will, we will learn how to use AI better and we'll get better jobs. Unfortunately, that is just one part of how the world is going to change. The second part is also about balancing out how much capital plays a role in advancing the society and how much labor is going to advance the society. I think we've reached that point in time for Singapore's history that capital might be taking flight a lot faster and labor is playing a very tough catch-up game. And that part to me is super important to address the overall gains of capital. So all your business owners, your enterprises, AI for them helps them accelerate their liftoff. But what about the people that are, have built these companies or are going to the workforce? And that is a huge part that needs to be addressed. We cannot just say that we will find, better jobs or we will learn how to use AI better, because there's no concrete substance to such a statement. There is no planning of what industries we will get these jobs from. I'm starting to see that the 5 task forces are making moves, and I'm glad today Straits Times also talked about how in Singapore there will be more use of stable coins and digital assets, and that was entirely my spiel during the campaigning. But we must start to embrace and acknowledge that certain industries will be lost forever. Yeah.
I think he talked about it, right? He talks about the disruption, and I think everybody acknowledges the disruption, everybody feels the disruption. Nobody denies that there are ways where you can mitigate some of these disruptions, but I think there are 2 kind of nagging questions that are left in that narrative. One is the lag between, as Jeremy pointed out, right, the disruption and the catching up. What happens in the meantime while we upskill, reskill, whatever it is, because these things take time. Also the fact that, Gen AI is evolving at a much quicker rate. So even if I were to catch up, right now, I take the time to catch up to what is the present realities. By the time I catch up,
it's already moved,
as it moves on, right? So I face this, for example, in work, right, where I think I'm trying to catch up with how students, for example, use Gen AI, and then I thought I caught up, and then now it's people using it differently, right? Obviously the speed that Gen AI is accelerating, I think, is slowing down a little bit from when we saw maybe one year ago. But there is always that question. We've always seen, economists have always said, what happens in the lag, right? In the lag where people lose their jobs, where the economy, and especially in a world where jobs and money move so quickly all around to wherever, the best labour force is. And I think Lawrence Wong acknowledges that. He says, we need to be at the edge, but bringing people to be at the cutting edge takes time. And what happens in the meantime beyond upskilling and reskilling? Because the SkillsFuture credits are great, but they don't deal with, we have quite a lot of evidence, for example, people like, sociologists like Toyo Yuan say, not everybody can use SkillsFuture credits, right? It privileges certain groups of people who have the time to go for upskilling courses, right? If you are working multiple jobs, you don't have time, don't have free time to go, take time off work, assuming your employers give you that freedom. That's one thing. And the other thing as well is, apart from the lag, is that Jeremy highlights that there are some industries that will be lost forever. What is the cost of that, right? But also, does that mean that everybody, will we see the same quantum of jobs, even if we were to all catch up? Is there always the same quantum of jobs, or will there just be fewer jobs, right? We don't know that. We can't project that yet. Some people try to do projections, but we really just don't really have those answers. So, what happens in those scenarios? What are the options available to individuals who find themselves structurally unemployed for a decent amount of time, or perhaps for the rest of their lives? For example, if you're nearer retirement age, where does reskilling kind of take you? Can you reskill in time to continue, or are you going to face, unemployment basically for the rest of your life, potentially? So I think that's one of the sort of questions that people are looking at. Upskilling, reskilling are good, but that assumes you are at a certain stage of your career and you have certain kind of privileges not everybody has. But because that was the only prong he took, people are left wondering, what happens if that's not necessarily the best option available to me.
Yeah.
So I think during the speech, what I kind of kept coming in my head was, akan datang, soon to come, other people will, not other people, but his colleagues will actually share the news with Singaporeans. But maybe that's just, his style. Like it's his consensus style of governance, and where he gives you the big picture, and then he teases, and then he says, my colleagues will fill in the fine details. What do you make of that? Do you think that this should be the way forward?
Okay, so I would take probably reference to a point in time where, to me, this is the most eye-opening. That was when ChatGPT, I think 3 or 3.5 launched in September of 2022. We have had 3 years to respond. And I think the akan datang mentality needs to be really like,
Datang now.
Yeah, datang now. Yeah, not belum, no. Yeah. It's like, I think that is the difference, right? Because we had 3 years to respond and we needed that. I guess maybe it's a confluence of bad timing for the election year. Imagine if we had like the election in 2023. Perhaps it will be very quickly on and about on AI, but because the leadership change was part of the, construction of the entire national strategy, so maybe that's something that was just bad timing, right? But more importantly, I think that when we talk about traineeships and the new, the CDC being involved with job fairs and whatnot, I think the simplification of SkillsFuture is important. Right now, when we hear the word SkillsFuture, it implies that there are a lot of people that are underskilled, but like what you said, there's a lot of underemployment going on that we don't have comprehensive studies for yet. And if the objectives and the incentives are clear for each SkillsFuture program and the costs are clear for each national SkillsFuture program, I think Singaporeans by and large will push themselves through to get the outcome they want, right? We are already the society that will, slog our way through university and whatnot, push ourselves studying day and night just to get the outcome, right? So it will be no different for a SkillsFuture program. It just has to be very much incentivized the right way. It has to be built with partnerships with all the government corporations the right way. And I think Singaporeans will gladly and confidently believe in the leadership of the PM and even for our Labour Chief Dr. Tan, right, and the NTUC. So I think that's very important. If we cannot analyze the data coming out of SkillsFuture programs, then we don't know how to improve on it. We don't know how to make it better. We don't know how to save costs, and we also don't know how to drive outcomes. Right now, the SkillsFuture programs as they are need simplification, and they need to be streamlined, and they need to be more transparent so that everybody can contribute. Yeah.
So do you think we need more data from that's coming out, like to give more details? So you're talking about specifically about
how much do we spend on these programs? What are their incomes post-program?
Who's using them?
Right. What age groups are using them? What are the case studies? For example, from a cohort of 100 workers that went from this industry to the next, which one? Right? Of course, typically the government says we don't cherry pick industries. Well, but at least let's cherry pick the ones that are going to, be lost, right? Your creative agencies are in trouble. Your freelancers are in trouble. Even certain types of tutoring are also in trouble already. And so those, we don't want to pick winners, because part of our entire Singapore system that has done well for us is really about letting people find out how to be most efficient with capital, most efficient with generating outcomes. But we must at least acknowledge that there are certain industries we cannot incentivize anymore, cannot let them continue growing. Yeah.
So I want to talk about something that he said, which is like when you said about going to, get everyone together, from government to ministries to people's companies. So, and PM Wong talked about it. So he says about wanting to do things with Singaporeans, not for Singaporeans, right? And so he also said that Singaporeans shouldn't rely on the government to solve problems. And then he also talks about how people should behave, right? And then, for example, he spoke about vaping, people using CAC vouchers to buy durians, and then screen news for children.
Yeah.
is this the reality of governing in Singapore? Because, on one hand, he's trying to be less paternalistic because he's saying, you take charge of your future, do all these things. But then on the other hand, sometimes he comes across as, people say sometimes he comes across as, he's like nagging us to do stuff. What does it say about what sort of leader he is?
I mean, I think there's always that. The PAP has had a long history of being criticised as being paternalistic, right? Telling Singaporeans what they can or cannot do, right? And I think Lawrence Wong himself acknowledged this at the beginning of his speech. He said at one point, rock and roll was frowned upon, comics were frowned upon, and, the government often took steps to mitigate what they saw to be the harmful side effects, right? Like, they at some point said, men should not have long hair because it was seen as part of the hippie rock and roll culture that was seen to be sort of negative Western influence or whatever it was then. And so he acknowledges there was a tension, I think, in the speech, or something that I noticed in his speech was that, so he recognizes, for example, the government can't and sometimes gets it wrong when it tries to regulate what it sees as harmful, because as he points out, he grew up in a rock and roll era, right? He's leaning into that identity quite a bit, and grew up with comic books, and he hasn't turned out too worse for wear, right? Is what he acknowledges. And then he goes on to say, however, there are some risks to young people that we cannot ignore, right? So there's a weird kind of thing going on where, on one hand, saying that the government can't be too paternalistic and sometimes gets it wrong, but then says, but there are very clear things that are. And I mean, I think there obviously can be nuance, but there certainly was a tension in that idea, right? So, for example, vaping, people can acknowledge is wrong. Obviously, it can have harmful effects. The government's taken a particularly paternalistic stance by saying, we are going to treat it as a drug, under the Drugs Act, we're going to, not all vaping, but particular kinds of vapes. And then all the recent news that have since come out about, going to the CBD and, having, I think yesterday, there was a whole, busting a whole bunch of people in the CBD and so forth, people who were not necessarily using,
accommodate
vapes, but vaping in general, right? And of course, screen time as well.
Vaping is illegal. That's just a rule across.
Yeah, exactly. And so if you want to take that very strong stance, and that is different governments have taken different kind of stances towards vaping. But certainly for screen time, right? It was a very strong statement. Preschoolers and babies and toddlers should not have any screen time at all. And then very clear stances. And this has been echoed by ACTA, right? Who I know, because as with kids in preschool, you get these notifications sent to the schools, and it's we advise you don't use screen time for all your kids, and I understand the argument, but I think it does come off as not necessarily recognizing the realities that people are bumping up against, right? Some of my friends say, well, I grew up on screens, what's the big deal, right? So it's once again going back to this comic book rock and roll thing, right? People thought it might have been bad, but in reality it wasn't. Obviously that's anecdotal, so not that strong. But I think parents are making these decisions. Sometimes they have the freedoms to do so. Sometimes their choices are constrained, right? If you come home after a long day of work, right? What is the alternative, right? It's not enough to say no screen time. Then what is the alternative to no screen time, right? So I mean, Lawrence Wong, a lot of the comments that came out, the memes that came out were, go outdoors and play, but then nobody can play football on void deck. I think was some people's immediate reaction, right? Was that you can't say give us some more outdoor time, but then not give us the outdoor spaces.
Yeah, not everybody can afford an extra pair of eyes.
Exactly, and so your parents want to send the kids down to the void deck to play, but then we're not making the places friendly to kids, right? Then what's the alternative? So there are those kinds of questions that come out, that you make a big statement like that and people are left going, then what is the support provided beyond these kind of very prohibitive statements, I think, I think where people feel a little bit judged, I think.
Yeah, I think it's really about the balance. So it's about taking that opportunity in the NDR to really address contradictions. For example, vaping ban, cigarette okay, right? Screen time, home-based learning, screen time okay.
Personal screen time
not okay. So where is that line being drawn, right? And then and
also, how is the line being drawn?
Yeah, how is the line being drawn? And also, you say, we first, work with the government, don't ask of the government anything. Okay, where is the line being drawn? We gave you the mandate, right? So draw those lines, right? And I think that's super important, because I think much of the much of the dignity of the youth needs to be built upon that agency, on their resilience, on being able to overcome failure, on being able to solve the problems and really go forward and chase the rainbow trail, blaze the trail.
Trails,
And that has to be reconciled in terms of like, okay, where are my pressure valves and where do I let off steam in Singapore, right? Like what you said, soccer, I think it was comedian Rishi that said, kids cannot go out and play soccer as well. I think Prof. Wali also said this, right? And it's like, you have to draw those lines very, not say that you should just give us instructions, but it's like we have to reconcile those contradictions, because when used for good, screen time is very, very good, right? You can learn things very quickly, deploy things very quickly, build things and all this. And also, and even right now, people are debating whether or not why we have cigarettes at all, and how do we curb addiction and all that, right? So what's the next step to curbing the addiction and going on from there? So I think those lines are something that we should continue to discuss, build upon the PM's rally. I think we should work with him, not try to just tear him down, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm glad you brought up the we first, because he ended his speech talking about the collective will of our people and the Singapore spirit. So that was the bit at the end which I mentioned was the moment he was trying to rah-rah the crowd. I guess that was the SG60 message. But before we get into discussion, let's take a look at what he said about being a we first society.
We say this in our national pledge. It starts with a simple but profound statement. We, the citizens of Singapore. It's not I or me, it is we. To keep Singapore going, we must be a we-first society. Because if everyone only thinks about me and puts me ahead of we, then we are finished.
So we've seen hints of this, come together moment in the Forward Singapore exercise. Your take on the we first messaging?
I think we've seen it before. I mean, I don't think it's a new message. I mean, it's framed slightly differently, but we've had this kind of collaborative approach being mooted. I mean, he did this in the last NDR rally as well, right? The Forward SG was basically a manifestation of his commitment to saying, we want to hear from Singaporeans, right? And that whole kind of talking to citizens about their concerns and then coming up with quite a big blueprint for where his government wanted to go. That being said, we've also seen previous prime ministers also say things like that, right? And having these initiatives, whether it was REACH, right, and various feedback units and so forth. So I think there's always that articulation of it. It's still quite early, I think, to say, what is new about it. I think that's the big question once again. Like, what is the new thing that is being rolled out to achieve this we kind of collaborative approach? And where I think that section kind of went, so I mean, we all, I think in principle, I think everybody agrees with that, right? Everybody wants a collaborative democratic government, right? But then there once again, we've returned to a few questions, right? Where does it come? Where does the collaboration come when citizens have anxieties, right? Is there an acknowledgement of those anxieties in a kind of like almost in an honest way, and saying, we recognize that there are feelings and therefore we need to work together with citizens, right? The government needs to work together with citizens to create change, right? Whether the anxiety surrounding, for example, cost of rentals, right? And the closing of SMEs, right? And all these, not just SMEs, but third spaces. I mean, the news came out yesterday that the projectors closing and all those conversations about what the effects are upon Singaporean society. And what is the government doing to address those, right? Rather than, obviously the whole point is that what are citizens supposed to do to address? There are some things that citizens can't always address, right? Or, they try to address, but, structural constraints, like for example, rising rentals, are not something citizens can necessarily resolve without government intervention, right? And so I think that there's that question. A lot of the examples that were provided, I suppose, to illustrate what a we society looks like is largely kind of volunteering at a fairly grassroots or small scale. And so, we people do that. But once again, the anxieties are structural, right? Are much bigger than just the individual, like beach cleanup. Like everybody can agree
Yeah,
that
yeah.
clean beaches are great.
In fact, I see him all the time actually because I'm always at East Coast.
And everybody agrees, right? These
Yeah.
beach cleanups, these kind of taking individual initiatives. And in COVID, a lot of people did that, right? Things like, for example, collecting laptops so, students who were less advantaged could do home-based learning. But then the structural question comes, after that, what happens to these students, right? We've donated laptops, people, comm science people, engineers have gone and wiped their laptops, donated them. Then what, right? What happens to these students? Are they then provided with the support? When they re-enter school, what resources are they provided, right? What the long-term effects of when an individual tries to make change, whether it's migrant workers, for example, helping migrant workers during COVID, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people did that, donated to migrant workers who were stuck in their dorms, right? I think it's raining raincoats came out of the COVID crisis. And so Lawrence Wong's right to highlight that a lot of these things happened in COVID. We saw a lot of individuals come together and build communities that, volunteered time and resources and so forth. But that's a one-off thing, right? These individuals, even when they come together, collectives can only do so much change because they cannot change it's very hard for them to change the structural underpinnings that cause these inequalities, right? Or the failings. Things like, for example, segregation when it comes to migrant workers and so forth. That's a bit harder, I think. That's why we need a little bit more concreteness to what that looks like.
Yeah.
So, I just want to ask, because both of you are actually saying that the speech should have acknowledged, some of the struggles that Singaporeans are going through, whether cost of living or housing or even the ground-up initiatives, which he did, but at some point he did, right? But are you saying that he should, if pointing these things out, their struggles and their anxieties, would it have made them feel seen? Is that what's the missing part for you?
Okay, so I think when you say something like we first and not I, not me, I don't know where that was going because it was, it was a conclusive statement, but there was like nothing to really create that energy out of it. And I think the sentiment on the ground and online is like, we are trying our best, right? And it is almost like, we gave you the opportunity to tell us how bad it is really. So, and I don't want to, and I don't want to sound like, all the alarms are off, but let's really face it, right? So F&B closures, record high. Business liquidations, record high. Business leverage, record high. We have, youth unemployment, also record high. And then, your nightlife, the revival program it's a bit murky so far. And, we have so many hawkers and even the hawker issue and all that. So there are so many issues that you could say we acknowledge that we might have made mistakes that got here. And I felt that would be more powerful to say, and then we'll take on the consultative thing, right? And I felt that would be a bit more powerful and more impactful because when you say we first, we are still going to take direction from the 5 task forces. And the 5 task forces, they always go top down, right? Be your different bodies here, So when we say we first, right, part of it is also saying that there were decisions made in the past that will no longer work. I mean, then we go we first, let's go find out why. And there are decisions in the past that got us here in the first place. Then we go we first. And I felt that would be something that people would say, you know what, this was a good rally, at least he acknowledged the problem. Right? Yeah.
I mean, I for me, when I heard we first, I was a bit like, wait. When did we get to be a hyper-individualistic society? Because I was like, are we? Like, because I don't see us as hyper-individualistic. So the we first thing came across as in like, stop thinking about yourself first, right? Yeah. But I mean, because we like to capture everything in like 4K, and I have seen videos of people helping each other, and I did think about this yesterday. But we also, I'm trying to figure out where his speech is coming from. Where is the we first going, or what triggered
What's
it?
the emotional message?
What was he trying to say? Because hearing from what both of you are saying, it's like, where do we go from here now?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know whether, this is me spitballing. I mean, maybe it's about a question of assigning blame. Right, it's not my fault, so maybe it's not necessarily hyper-individualism, like we trample on each other, but maybe the concern was that individuals are blaming others for failing. So rather than, I mean, this has been refrained in previous times, talking a little bit about, keyboard warriors and so forth, right? Individuals who, rather than kind of getting up and solving societal issues that they identify, they instead go online and complain about it and complain about their lives, and they don't take the initiative to change the community, to be the change they want to be. That sort of attitude. So maybe it's that. Maybe it's the sense that, in response to some of the complaints, we were talking about, right, people struggling with, I don't think he's necessarily saying people should go out and look harder for jobs. I don't think he's making those claims. But, if people are complaining about ills in society, maybe they should go out and be the change they want to be, I think. And that's at least what I got from the illustrations he was using.
I
didn't
can't
quite
get
see.
behind that. I can't get behind that.
And that seemed to be from the illustrations. I mean, that was the furthest I got, because I think it was big statements and then illustrations, and so that's what I kind of got. But it was a little bit confusing, because I think up to that point, a lot of the issues he had highlighted kind of, as I mentioned earlier, feel very structural. AI changes, I'm like, what community things can I do? Okay, maybe I can help people, I don't know, train people to deal with AI, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think if you say we first, right, then we also must acknowledge our identity as Singapore's economic identity. We are a financial hub, which I feel like we can continue to be. We are a trade hub, which we continue to be. And we need to acknowledge how we got here. Who are the major participants of this economy? How much have they gone ahead in terms of the economic affluence and opportunities? And who are being left behind? And if you really want to talk about we first, the conversation is, are we a we anymore, right? You had these opportunities to go ahead very far. Is the next generation going to be able to have some of that gain, right? Are they going to be able to study abroad, have overseas experiences, or is the next generation going to have to say, define your own
journey
or well-being, right? Because I would think that there's still a good you talk about we first, you must have a discussion about the economic outcomes that some people will have and continue to have for their next generation. And some parts in society in Singapore will never have. And I think that is more important when we talk about we first. Because the kids today, if you are unable to find a job, or you're able to only get your BTO at say 35, and then you got MOP 10 years or what, you are very much behind the curve. And that does not feel we first for me, right? And I empathize with the youths and even the middle-aged workers that are sandwiched, right? Because the economic opportunities that they would have in life, right, is severely constrained by things like high cost of housing, right? And I think acknowledging these things and trying to talk about how, look, everybody aspires to have some form of economic financial independence so that they can actually pursue the things that they want in life. We want to talk about we first. Let's talk about who has that financial independence in Singapore and how we can encourage more people to collectively share on the outcomes that Singapore have been able to bring for Singaporeans all across the board. Right? Yeah.
So I wanted to round off this conversation on this note of what happens now. Where do we go with we first? And I mean, what do you think Singaporeans can take away from that? Oh,
I don't know. I've got to compose my thoughts. Jeremy.
SG61, CDC vouchers. No, I mean,
Jeremy, a permanent solution.
Yeah. No, I think where we go from here is to, really look at where society sees the relationship between techno-feudalism, capital, labor. Do we want to keep it this way? Because within one generation, right? Taman used to famously say this, right? President Taman is within one generation, you are able to, escape your current situation and climb up the ladder. But with AI, right, is that the Singaporean exceptionalism anymore, right? Because education does not help you climb up the ladder. So if that's the case, we need to go first principles. Let's look at our education system. Is it time for reform? Let's look at the relationship between our trade unions and government-linked corporations. What exactly is the role of capital here? How can we deploy capital in a way that the gains of each company, let's just say let's say a cleaning company, right? Is it that the shareholders benefit the most or the workers benefit the most? Or, even it could be like transport logistics, right? Is it the shareholders benefit the most or the workers benefit the most? We have to have these conversations because capital will keep getting the benefits of AI and accelerationism, but labor will be left out. And for We First Singapore, that's not what we want. Yeah.
I think in terms of consultation, personally, I think a lot of it is that consultation where people genuinely feel that they are heard and understood, I think. So, whether it is, for example, people who have anxieties about, workers who have anxieties about AI, or students who can't find jobs, right? Or parents who, have jobs and are trying to keep those jobs and therefore, also trying to be good parents at the same time. And therefore sometimes have to use screens or find ways kind of getting around that. And so when we have those consultations, to not necessarily feel that those conversations are as a way of largely gestural, I think is the term we sometimes use, which is that there's more of a gesture than it is anything kind of genuine, where decisions have already been made. That, for example, screen time is inherently bad, for example. That's the kind of message coming out, right? You want to talk to parents about why they use screen time, but then you're basically saying, but screen time is already bad. Right? Or screen time only when it's used by our teachers, by MOE, then it's okay, right? There's already a kind of a presumption already. And I think that's one of the big ways in which, this consultative, collaborative form of governance, it can't work if we start already with the assumptions about the rightfulness or wrongfulness of certain things, right? Like, anybody who engages in vaping is going to cause this significant harm to society. That vapes, for example, are inherently worse than cigarettes, right? Those are those big assumptions. Now, finding out why people vape and trying to be, not necessarily to say that, certain things are always inherently good, not to open the floodgates to that, but then to have that kind of empathy of saying, recognizing that it might be a little bit more than just, for example, punitive measures are necessary or something. Maybe it's a bigger problem. And having those conversations where people feel comfortable that they're being heard and their concerns are being taken into account, I think is the big situation, right? So AI is a lot more than just AI. It's a lot of other considerations here and other cost of living issues. Yeah.
Well, thank you both for the conversation today.
Thank you for having us.
Well, come back at the next NDR maybe.
Who will be our next sponsor?
We'll have to see, but thank you both for being thank you both for being here. And that's it from The Usual Place. Now, if you're watching us on YouTube, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so that you won't miss the next episode. And if you have thoughts on what PM Wong spoke about at the National Day rally or what my guests today have said, do drop a comment on YouTube or talk to me on Instagram at The Usual Place Podcast. I'll see you next week on Thursday at noon.